Hey, welcome to the Blue Collar Fly Fishing Podcast. Today's guest is Kirk Deeter. Kirk is a vice president of Trout Unlimited. He's in charge of their media operations, including serving as editor-in-chief of Trout Magazine. He is the founding editor of Angling Trade Magazine, the industry publication. He's the author of numerous books, including the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing, right here. A fantastic collection of tips that he wrote with his writing mentor, Denver Post outdoor columnist Charlie Myers. And he is quite possibly one of the nicest guys in the industry. So and I'm incredibly happy to have the opportunity to speak with Kirk today. We're going to drink a little whiskey, talk about the state of the industry in the fly fishing pandemic year, and hopefully have a good time. I wanted to say thank you to our sponsors. This show is underwritten by Imperfects Books, thelocalangler.com. They are my publisher. We are working on several new hyperlocal fly fishing guide titles and some other stuff that I think you guys will be interested in. You can get all the updates at thelocalangler.com. We are also sponsored by Real Ale and Real Spirits in Blanco, Texas. These are my favorite brewers and distillers in what is becoming an increasingly crowded field here in the Lone Star State. And you can only get Real Spirits, straight malt whiskey, Real Spirits Hill Country Gin, and Real Ale beer in Texas. So come on down and join us sometime. We're also sponsored by Duck Camp. Duck Camp is a hunting and fishing apparel maker headquartered in East Austin, and just really fantastic, big-hearted guys over there. And they make some quality outdoor gear. Check them out at duckcamp.com. Well, Kirk, I want to say, first of all, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're incredibly busy, and I'm super excited to talk to you about a couple of things. The next 6 episodes are really going to kind of focus on my first 6 episodes are going to kind of focus on the pandemic year and what it's done to us and for us, and to our rivers and for our rivers. And you've written a lot about this, and you even had some interesting things to say about it a bit prophetically, even before the pandemic hit, which I thought was interesting. And I'll get to that. But I want to talk about that. And I can think of no one better to give us a kind of 30,000 foot view than you. And I would also like to talk a little bit about work in fly fishing, and particularly the work of writing about fly fishing, since that is your business.
Yeah. Well,
are you good with that?
I'm game, man. I'm game.
All right.
And I got my whiskey. So, like, if you want me to pour one,
yeah. Well, hey, why don't we start with that? Actually, so I'm going to start with the rye whiskey, the rye grain. Do you see that one?
Mm-hmm.
Here's the what it looks like.
Rye grain, single malt.
Yeah.
Nice.
And I don't need to tell a veteran like you how to drink whiskey, but I drink it neat. But if you want to splash a little water in it or an ice cube, it'll change it up a little.
Well, I'll tell you what. They filmed the movie True Grit down in Ridgeway, Colorado, in Montrose, and John Wayne went to a bar there, and they still serve. You would do 2 fingers of whiskey and a cold glass of water next door, but whiskey neat and water next door. And that's the way the Duke did it. And that's the way I do it. So
that's awesome. The John Wayne whiskey setup, in Texas, and I think probably in Colorado too, we say that whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting. And I think that's going to become more and more true as we roll deeper into this century, for sure. But salute.
Salute. That's very nice.
Yeah, a little spicy. You get some of that rye spice in that one. Have you had Davin's whiskey before? It occurred to me after I sent it to you that you probably had.
I might have tasted it. I think I did do a taste of it when I was at the Guadalupe River Trout Fest. They didn't have it this year, but the year before. It was like my last trip that I went anywhere. I went to Texas.
Okay. So, yeah, and I know they stopped by to, he and Josh Crumpton stopped by to see you in Steamboat Springs a couple of months ago, too. I thought maybe they had some then.
That's right. We had some of the, don't put me on the spot, but the kind of like the agave-based spirit from Texas that was quite good. And I still have the bottle upstairs.
Yeah, the totem, right? The Pachuca he makes.
Pachuca. It was wonderful, actually. I mean, I drank it all in like a week. I made margaritas in the summer with it, and it was good. So.
Yeah, right on. No, I enjoy that too, and that's going to be a regular thing. He wanted to do it with. I think he wanted to do it with rattlesnake this year, and was having a hard time getting the label approved. So he just stuck with wild hog as the meat component of the Pachuca. So I think he's looking forward to doing a whole line of those with different wild game.
Sweet. Well, it's an interesting idea. All good stuff. Yeah. So
for sure. Well, man, let's for our listeners who may not know much about you, can you just give us the brief bio of how you became the king of all fly fishing media?
That's going a little too far, but I'm now the editor-in-chief of Trout Unlimited's media. I'm an editor at large for Field and Stream still. And that was really my bread and butter, was coming up through the Field and Stream ranks. And I had written some books and freelanced with Fly Fishermen and Wild on the Fly and other places, but landed with Field and Stream in about 2003 and stayed with them. And it was really cool, man. That was like we're getting the Yankee pinstripes. Actually, the truth is I was about to take a healthcare job in Tennessee. And I sent in my resume. I'd written a book called Castwork about guides and another book called Tideline. And I'd sent those to Sid Evans, who was the editor at Field and Stream at the time. And there was an assistant editor, deputy editor job open. And I went and I flew and I went to New York and I was there. And Sid said, we were having a beer after like the formal part of the interview. We're on the corner of some bar in New York. He said, dude, what would you want to do? How many days a year do you fish? And I was like, I live in Colorado. I'm 150 days a year. He's like, why don't you just stay in Colorado and write stories for us? And that was like the coolest thing anyone ever did. So
yeah, I've heard you say that. It's the nicest thing anyone ever did for you. And that was kind of back before remote work was a thing. So, lots of folks are doing that these days, but I think that what a gift to be able to do that. And also what a smart thing for Field and Stream to get a writer who's actually out in the field and on the stream.
Yeah, it was great. It was boots in the water, right? So, I still believe there's really no substitute for substance, and not that I'm the smartest or the fish the most or write the best or any of that stuff, but I've got a pretty good blend. I hope, knock wood, that, my boots are usually wet and I know how to turn a phrase and I kind of meld the two together and it's worked. It's like, playing music or something. So that's what I do. That's who I am. And it's been something that I'm not going to give up. I mean, I also, I'm too old down the path now of, I'm not going to do any career changes. I'm just real happy with where I am and what's going on, even though the media world's changing quite a bit. So,
well, you're changing with it, keeping up real well for an old guy like myself. And this whole podcasting thing's new to me. And I don't think I'll ever get around to making films, which seems to be what the young kids are really into these days. But yeah, man. So you're at Trout Unlimited as a vice president and in charge of all of their communications efforts, but also notably Trout Magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And you're the Trout Unlimited guy who wrote the carp book.
Yeah, I am. That's right. Well, I'm a heretic. I mean, I've always been pretty even with my field and stream stuff, I've been pretty irreverent as far as like the long-standing quote unquote traditions of fly fishing. I was like the guy who was bucking the system before it was cool to buck the system. I tried to be, at least. And then it just took 20 years for me to get noticed. And then I turned into an old guy too. But I was a young guy in my 30s who was bucking the systems back in the day before there were blogs or, you could make videos and get them seen and all that stuff. I kind of feel good because I straddled the two worlds. Sometimes I feel like the last gunfighter, like who, my first job was in a newspaper and I smelled like ink when I came home at 2:00 in the morning. And yet, I'm kind of still around in some of this newer stuff, and it's all good. It's all exciting. It's fun.
Yeah, that's I worked for a small daily newspaper as well for a while, and I was listening to your conversation with Jason on the fly tapes about this, and Jason Rolfe, the editor of the Fly Fish Journal, and I completely agree with you that there is. You said that you learned more in 6 months of writing on deadline for a newspaper than you did in 4 years of studying English and writing in college. And I couldn't agree more. And other people have said it as well. I think Hemingway, in fact, credited his writing to his early start in journalism. And it's a cool thing to have done. It's not a great way to make a living these days, unfortunately. And as you well know, in Texas, all of the big daily papers used to have an outdoor columnist and maybe some stringers as well who would contribute outdoor stuff. And there'd be a big outdoor section on the Sunday paper. And I think David Sykes in Corpus Christi he wasn't the very last one. It was Shannon Tompkins at the Houston Chronicle. He retired, I think about a year ago, and he was the last one left in Texas. So we don't get that anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah, but you know what? I think I don't think it's on the one hand. I think that maybe I was one of the last of the gunfighters or buffalo hunters or whatever, that romantic. But on the other hand, what goes around comes around. And I think this pandemic has got so many people friggin' zoomed out and digitaled out. And there's a little mini renaissance of people wanting to actually open books or magazines and read them in a chair and tune out the outside world. And I think that Amanda Gorman has done more to raise the power of the written and spoken word for younger people than we could have ever dreamed could have happened. So, I mean, I see writing is always going to be in vogue. It's just going to be different ways of packaging it. And so the daily newspapers go away or whatnot, but a good storyteller is still always going to be in demand. I wouldn't ever dissuade someone from becoming a storyteller if that's what's burning in their heart and that's what they want to do. I would say be smart, have a lot of irons in the fire, and figure out what ways work. And you can't, it's like a musician. You got to play a lot. You got to gig live. You got to be good studio music. You got to practice your scales. You got to improvise. You got to do all that. But if the music is playing in your heart, you just got to follow it.
Yeah, man, I totally agree with you. And, I take that gamble every time I pitch a magazine story or start on a book manuscript. So I think there will always be an audience. I've been hearing print is dead or print is dying for almost 20 years now. And she may not be feeling real well some years, but she's not going anywhere. I think it'll always be there. You're right. And I have found in this pandemic year that I have reverted to some kind of old fashioned stuff. I send more notes now, handwritten. I bought a fountain pen the other day just because, I type for work. So I thought maybe I'd scribble with a fountain pen for my friends, So anyway, I don't know. It's an interesting time for sure.
Well, fundamentally, right? Writing is very raw and very honest and very essential. So in a spot like fly fishing, right? Which is a stick and a string and primitive tool by design. I think writing still syncs up very well with fly fishing.
Yeah, I agree with you. And do you, I think I was talking to Jeff Troutman about this last week, and I think he said he had seen somewhere that something like 80% of all angling literature comes out of fly fishing, and we're a tiny percent. I don't know if that number is accurate, but it would seem so, maybe just from looking on Amazon. And we're a tiny niche within fishing. So why is that? Why do those things sync up together so well, do you think?
I don't know, but I think it's very, very true. And as an editor, I can tell you, once in a while, about twice a year, I'll get a letter from somebody that says, hey, why do you do more conventional fishing stuff in Trout Magazine? And it's not like I'm against it. I conventional fish. I love to, I don't really conventional fish much for trout. I'm not a spin caster for trout, but I musky fish, I walleye fish, I saltwater fish, I surf cast. Got nothing against gear fishing, but the honest to God truth from an editor's perspective is I'll get 100 pitches on stories that are fly based. And, I'll see maybe one, that's about going and throwing the Panther Martin for, it just doesn't happen. Right. So there's not that literary connection. And now how to, where to, ice fishing, I'm all about it. I mean, we're going to go there and we can, but the well is just so much deeper in fly fishing than it is in a lot of places.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we were talking a couple of weeks ago, you and I were, and I should say for our listeners, you and I have never met in person. Unfortunately, I'm looking forward to when we can do that. But we've chatted a lot, and it turns out we have quite a few mutual friends, and it would make sense that you know a lot of people because you're kind of at the center of the quote unquote industry. It doesn't make sense that I would know some of those same people because I'm stuck down here in Texas, and I'm not much of a joiner, and I don't talk to a lot of people. So, but it really is a small world, and somehow we all seem to find each other. And I'm not really sure how that happens, but I do think there is something about the sport that lends itself to folks who prioritize the places that they're chasing fish and the people that they're associating with, and possibly some sort of abnegation of ego. I mean, certainly I find fly fishing humiliating and frustrating at times. But we are so purposefully disadvantaging ourselves to catch these fish that I don't think you can go into it with a really big head. And I'm not seeing the same kinds of huge egos or machismo in the sport that I see among some, say, tournament bass fishermen, maybe. So I think it does select for a certain kind of person, and we start off with a lot in common. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I agree with you. I read your book, man. I knew I liked you when I read your book. So
well, very kind of you, thanks.
No. I'm not just saying that because of your book or what, but you read the words of somebody, and the first thing you know, does he or she know his stuff? Is she talking the talk or walking the walk or both? And I found your book so honest, and honest is really important in fishing, right? And open. And that to me exuded confidence and showed a character that immediately we were friends and we had never met. So I wanted to write a nice review of your book, and we have become friends, virtual friends during a pandemic, but yeah, sure. We'll go fish and all that stuff too. That'll all follow. And I just think that those connections are very substantial. There's very little superficial connection in fly fishing.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, and I appreciate something that 3 words that you said you learned from one of your writing mentors: clarity, simplicity, and honesty in writing from one of your college professors. And I think I've been thinking about that a lot ever since I heard you say that, because that really is everything, and the honesty component of that is huge, I think. I wonder these days, and I wasn't thinking we were going to go here, but let's do it. I wonder if social media mucks that up a little bit. You would think sometimes from looking I would think sometimes from looking at my Instagram feed that everyone is catching, 25-inch brown trout every day. And so much that I have started unfollowing some of those accounts just because, well, number one, I don't know that I've ever seen a 25-inch brown trout. Number two, and you've been all over the world. You've fished everywhere, it seems. Argentina is probably not on my travel schedule in the next year, maybe not the next 5 years. And I feel sometimes like it almost devalues the experience that I can have right here at home, which at the moment I'm perfectly happy with. I'm perfectly happy taking the 2 or 3 weight down to the creek and catching long ear sunfish or bluegills or 1.5 pound Guadalupe bass. I'm perfectly happy coming up to Colorado to the Sangre de Cristos and chasing 10 or 12 inch Rio Grande cutthroats in a high mountain stream. And I don't feel like I need that big fish, but I start to question myself sometimes when I see everybody else's feeds. So, I mean, how much of an impact do you think that has on people? And is it good, bad, indifferent? Where are we going with that?
Well, I feel kind of bad in some regards because I feel like a lot of my career has been writing out there wild stories, catching stuff in the jungle and above the Arctic Circle in Russia. And I'm not going to take it back. I love that. It was I was just lucky. I was just a guy. I was like Flat Stanley. I got to go to different places and fish. And I just found myself. If I wrote a book, like the first line of the book would be, how in the hell did I ever get here? Because that's a recurring theme that I always would. And it wasn't just the fishing, but that's the point. The fishing was like such a small part of it. It was, sitting at the table with the colonel of the army base in Bolivia with the money on the table to, fly into the jungle where the drug runners were to make sure that we wouldn't get shot down and stuff like that. Like it's flying on an Mi-8 helicopter above the Arctic Circle in Russia and wet wading in June, and noticing climate change that way. And just all sorts of cool things. You just wonder, like sitting on the beach in Baja with a former Hollywood by the Sea gang member who had retired and moved back to Baja, and we were grilling cabrilla and sitting around and he's showing me his bullet hole scars and tattoos and stuff. But we're just chatting and talking about fishing, and it was, those things are so much more substantive and so much more interesting that, to be honest with you, I don't pay attention to the pictures of the fish, and I don't really post the pictures of the fish myself. I've got a picture of fish, I guess my profile picture on Facebook's got me holding the big fish. It's a grip and grin out of the worst taste, but my friend Tim Romano took the photo and I like it, so I'm gonna run it. But I think that people will soon enough find that the coolest adventures are always close to home, and they have so much less to do with fish and so much more to do with the people that you share the experience with and the landscapes that you're in. And that's 90% of it. And the fish part might generate clicks. It might be click candy, but it doesn't interest me very much.
Yeah. And isn't that odd? I mean, and because the fish is it's the thing without which we would not be doing any of this. I mean, it's the ostensible reason for getting out there. And I know it seems like it's a very common progression for anglers to, what is it they say? First you want to catch a fish, then you want to catch a big fish, and then you want to catch a lot of fish, and then you stop caring about the fish so much. And I find that to be absolutely true. It's not that I don't care at all about the fish. Of course I do, and of course I'd rather catch fish than not catch fish. But I can't remember. We had a bunch of guys down last year when it looked like the pandemic was almost over. From all over the country, and some of us had fished and met before, some of us hadn't. But what I remember most is not the 3 rivers that we fished and the fish we caught, but the campfire. And sitting around and swapping songs and just talking, just having time and taking that pause, and that's what turns me on about it these days. When I'm not fishing by myself, when I'm fishing by myself, I'm probably thinking more about improving my craft, improving my ability to cast well and present the right fly and present it the right way to whatever's out there.
You live, you're in like the hotbed. I'm envious of Texas. I love Texas. Like I'm a de facto Texan, like, which is rare for a Coloradan, right? Because we see a lot of Texas plates here, and I love. I'm not complaining about it.
I've seen the bumper stickers that say somewhere in Texas a village is missing its idiot. So I know how that runs.
So, but just by my love of music, I've always kind of connected, and I'm playing music and listening, like Guy Clark and Robert O'Keefe and Lyle Lovett. And I think that you find a sense of respect and camaraderie there that's beyond just the performance. It's in the songwriting process and in the culture and in the community. And, I think that's something that we fly fishing authors and anglers might aspire toward. I think we're part of a very small community of kindred spirits. And I think that comes through in certain pockets, same in jazz music. It's the same in whatever, it's just hard to relate. And I'm sorry if I'm tripping over my words, but I think it's really important for people to embrace all things that are fishing that have nothing to do with fish.
I agree 100%. And I think, for me anyway, this is where I found, found my tribe, I guess, people that I am absolutely 100% comfortable with and want to spend time with. It's not at my day job. It's not at, not even, my extended family necessarily so much. The tribe I was born into, I love them dearly, but if I, have a couple of extra days, I might try to round up a few of the guys or a few of the gals and, let's hit the river somewhere. And it won't be about the fish. It'll be about the lunch. It'll be about the talk on the drive there, which is how your first fishing book came about, I think, isn't it? You had just finished a trip with your good friend and cousin, and you were rehashing the trip and right. on a long drive, and that turned into Castwork. Is that correct?
It did. So I'm with my cousin Andrew, who's actually my wife's first cousin, but one of my friends from school. We were friends, and I happened to marry his cousin. But we would go. I lived back east, and he lived in Colorado, and I would come and visit him, and we'd go and fish. And we said, let's go write a book. And so we started to do this. No one thought we'd ever publish the book. It was totally an excuse. But we got like 10 guides into it. We would go and talk to guides and see this. It was also like a PhD, or like, I didn't go to graduate school, but it was like a University of the River graduate program where I got to listen to, Patty Riley tell me about stuff, and Terry Gunn and Denny Breer and Pat Dorsey and others. And it was great experience. We didn't think we'd sell the book, but we sold the book. We had to make the book, and we did it. And it just, that's how it turned. That's how it turned out. So,
have you thought about going back and revisiting some of those guides?
Sadly,
later.
Sadly, a good number of them are gone. Not quite half of them, but it makes you realize the fragility of all this. 20 years later, about half of my Castwork friends are still around, and they are. I still do talk to them, a lot of them, some more than others. But like Terry Gunn, for example, I still consider a mentor and friend. I was working on that book, right, and didn't have any two nickels to rub together. I had no money. I had nothing, but I paid. Got this guy trip at Lee's Ferry, and Terry saw I'm writing this book, and we're taking the photos, and he was game. And he was the one who put me in touch with John Randolph to write my very first printed story on fly fishing.
Wow.
And so Terry did that for me to kind of push the snowball down the hill. And now, he's never, the thing of it is that with those type of relationships, they never fall apart. Like I consider him one of my best mentors and friends. So.
And a couple of years after that, you went and you wrote a coastal version. It seems like you did that a little more expeditiously than your many summers long Western mountain trips, but you actually visited my hometown, Rockport, Texas. I was excited to see that, and everything in that chapter with Chuck just rings 100% true. That's
Go ahead. Well, I'm sorry. It was cool. That was the funny thing is we had success with the first book, but it wasn't like Mondo success. It was like GarageBand success, right?
Right.
So the next book was the saltwater version. We were thinking we'll kick that out. And that was, like you said, it was more production. And then when we went on tour, it was like a band going on tour, but the band didn't get along as well. And a lot of, it was almost like half Spinal Tap and half, fishing. There are backstories there that I'll get into some other day, some other time. But it was a cool book. And I met, again, a lot of great friends like Conway Bowman, shark fishing, San Diego, remains one of my closest friends in the world. We kind of broke the story for each other. And that was really cool. That's fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Tideline was funny because every time I think back on that, I think of literally some of the fights that we had on the road amongst our crew. So, yeah.
Are you and Andrew still friends? I mean, I know your family.
Oh, yeah.
But okay. Good. Yeah, good deal. So do you have the one? I think I wrote 4 grain on it. It's corn, rye, wheat, and barley distillers edition. Let's try that one if you're ready for it. This isn't actually out yet. I think they'll be releasing this next month, April, and I think it's delicious. And I think it's that wheat in there. A lot of whiskey makers do wheated bourbons, and this isn't quite a bourbon, but I think that wheat really softens it. Cheers.
Cheers. Yeah, that's different. I like that.
Trout Fest next year. Hopefully it'll be available, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like Trout Fest. I'm hoping to get down there. And I you know what? My last fishing day was fishing with Steve Ramirez for Guadalupe bass. Other than, fishing here in Colorado, which I fished like crazy all through the pandemic. But my last exotic adventure was Guadalupe bass in Texas.
Aren't they pretty?
They're awesome.
Yeah, and Steve's a super sweet guy.
Oh, one of the best, with a great book out and another honest voice, right?
Yeah, Casting Forward is his book that just came out a couple of months ago. So if you're listening to this and you haven't seen Casting Forward yet, run out and grab it. It's a book by a writer who fishes. It's not a where-to, how-to, but it will, I think, inspire you to want to get out there.
For sure.
So that brings us up in your book lineup to I think that brings us up to the Little Red Book of Fly Fishing in 2010. And now that book has done well. It seems to be perennially in the top 20 or top 50 of all fishing books on Amazon. I think the copy I have is the 11th printing or something. And it's done really well. You wrote that with your friend and mentor, Charlie Myers from Denver. And Charlie sadly has passed on now, but I see, and I've pre-ordered something called the Little Black Book of Fly Fishing. Can you tell me about that?
Sure. Thank you for bringing that up. The Little Red Book has been, like the little engine that could. It just keeps chugging along, and we're surprised by that. But the idea was to present simple notion ideas. It's not rocket science. Fly fishing doesn't have to be. Charlie, who was the outdoors editor of the Denver Post, Charlie Myers, and was my mentor. He was firmly of the mind that a lot of people made a lot of money talking about how difficult fly fishing was and how you had to master the cast and the loops had to be this way. It was a big physics lesson and this and that entomology lesson.
Right.
And
which can be super intimidating for someone who is interested in the sport.
Right. It can be super intimidating, but it could also be super cool. Mm-hmm. The point is it's not the price of admission, right? So fly fishing can be as complicated and complex and interesting as you want to dive into it. But the price of admission is not super, like you don't have to know how to cast 60 feet and you don't have to know every bug in the river and you don't all that. So we wanted to really not dumb it down, but just simplify it and open our notebooks and write. So we did. And it took off. It's one of those phenomena that just surprised us by, we were riffing off of Harvey Pennick's book on golf, which is a Texas classic, right? Sure. But his point was take dead aim, right? And boil the golf game down instead of all the physics lessons and all this and grip this and swing this and machine this and just take dead aim, aim at the flag. Same kind of thing with the fly fishing. So
yeah, and it's a lovely book. It's easy to read. It's pithy. It's sometimes funny, irreverent, as you said, and it's a lot of very useful and also easily digestible tips in there. And it's no surprise that it's remained a favorite for so long. Now, is the Little Black Book going to be more of the same?
It is. So we pick up there, and now I'm again partnering because I think it's hard for one person to stand on a soapbox and talk about tips on fly fishing. I really do. I don't have that confidence. I'm not that good an angler. I think that it's important to have some, humility or try to be realize that I'm never gonna. The more you learn, the more you realize that you're never gonna get it all. So having reinforcements is good, and the reinforcements we had here is Chris Hunt, and Chris Hunt was introduced to me by Charlie Myers, who wrote the Red Book with me on our first trip as we designed the Red Book. So here Charlie's gone, but 10 years later, another protege of Charlie and I are coming together, and we call it the Little Black Book of Fly Fishing, not so much like it's dirty little secrets in your black book. It's more Black Diamond. It's kicked up a notch. It's a little bit more expert. We still try to boil things down into a few paragraphs, sometimes a page at most, but try to keep it simple, but we're trying to take your level. Instead of just teaching a basic cast or basic presentation, we're teaching you things on how to up your game, like one level toward expert. So black, like Black Diamond.
Gotcha. Okay. So, and it's, so if you get the Little Red Book and the Little Black Book, you should be covered, right? I mean, that's your bachelor's and master's degree in fly fishing.
No, that helps pay my son's bachelor's and master's degree and whatever he wants to do. That's all.
There you go.
No guarantees, man.
And your son's in Nebraska. Is that right?
Yes, he's at the University of Nebraska. So
right on. So that comes out in August of 21. It's available for pre-order now, the Little Black Book of Fly Fishing. And I'm sure it's going to be a huge hit. In between these other books that we've talked about, and I mentioned this earlier, you wrote the Orvis Guide to Fly Fishing for Carp, which I think came out in 2013. And Chris Hunt actually did he do the intro on that book for you?
Yes.
Yeah, he's a fine writer. Certainly is.
Wonderful writer. He's a really good writer, and a good friend. And some of my best carp days were with him. And I don't know, everyday carp fishing is kind of an interesting and different adventure, because carp fishing in Idaho is different than carp fishing in Texas versus carp fishing on Beaver Island in Michigan or any of that.
Yeah, Beaver Island is one of my bucket list destinations, actually. Just getting out on those crystal clear flats, it looks like the Caribbean or something, and sight fishing carp and smallmouth bass just looks like an incredible amount of fun.
Okay, so let's make that our trip when we go fish together.
Okay,
we'll go to Beaver Island, and we'll do it next summer. Well, not God willing, the pandemic is behind us and we can go fish, but we'll go like sometime after Memorial Day 2022, and we'll go up to Beaver Island.
That sounds great, Kirk. I'm going to put that on the calendar. So in the Orvis Guide to Fly Fishing for carp, you actually I highlighted it. let me see if I can find that real quick. You said you'd be surprised how many of the fly fishing personalities you see on television or read in books and magazines are nuts about carp fishing in their time off. It has gotten to the point now, for me personally, where I judge how fanatical or serious or good an angler is by the number of carp pictures I see, or the success I see them having on carp, or even the dedication with which they're pursuing them. Carp are one of those species that until you figure a few things out, and your book is a huge shortcut to that, you may have some really frustrating days.
I have frustrating days all the time. I've been a guide / somebody gets stuck with me for the Carp Slam in Denver, which is a fundraiser for DTU. And I've never won it. I've never been close. I wrote a book on carp fishing, but I annually go down there and get humiliated by the carp. It's a matter of checking your ego at the door. And, sometimes we catch fish and come close, but sometimes it's not. And carp are the most grounding fish of any, any guy can go use a bobber. Nothing. I'm not going to get in, on the bobber train, but like any guy, the reason they invented the bobber and double weighted nymph rig fishing is because guides who have success and they get people to pull on fish, and people get fired up pulling on the fish, and that's all good. But carp, they take no prisoners. Carp take no prisoners.
That is the truth. Back when I first moved to Austin back in the mid '90s, I was going back to the coast maybe twice a month on weekends to go red fishing, or I discovered snook about that time and discovered that we had them in Texas, and so I was driving down to do that as well. And the weekends I couldn't go, I still wanted to practice my cast, practice on fish. And I saw these carp swimming in, downtown Austin. I thought, that's about the same size and shape as a big redfish. I said, that ought to be fun. I didn't know they were supposed to be hard. And I don't know if it's a consequence of that, but I caught quite a few. Once I really started chasing carp for their own sakes, it got a lot harder, it seemed. Once I got up on some of these skinny streams and started stalking them, I actually now buy reels based on how quiet they are. You write in your book that, the grinding of your gravel, underneath your boots you kick a rock, and that can cause the carp to shoot out of that shallow water. They have such huge lateral lines. They're just one big ear. And I actually found that the sound of me stripping line off a reel could do the same thing. And I was shocked because I thought surely that won't spook them. But after I watched it happen a dozen times, I said, well, I need to get a quieter reel. It has not increased my catch rate noticeably, though.
I don't know if this is, I haven't heard this, through the carp grapevine, but like someone told me that someplace, and it might have been Beaver Island, like they tagged fish, they'd catch them and they'd tag them and they'd let them go. And like, they catch and release hundreds of fish, and the amount of recatch of those fish, carp I'm talking about, was like in single digits. So like they caught 300 and they recaught like 8. And they think that it's because they're so smart, they figured out the taste or the smell or the sense of the metal in the hook, or who knows what it is. But carp have the ability through their barbels to sense you, they can smell you, they can feel you coming, they can hear you coming. And when they do, they tell all their friends, right? So it's and they do tell all their friends through, chemically, don't they? There's a pheromone they release when they get stressed out by this. So yeah, there's, they're maddening and just also a ton of fun. I don't know why anyone would ever call them trash fish these days. They're here to stay. They found their niche in most of our rivers and lakes, and they're not really hurting anything. And sometimes they're the only thing that will eat a fly, and will certainly be the strongest fish that you tug on in that stream. I'm sure. And the great irony is when they were brought here, basically the same year as the brown trout. The brown trout were thought some rich man's fancy, right? And the carp were the great savior for the inland nation, the United States, that didn't have refrigeration and wanted fish sources, wanted the smart, sturdy fish, hardy fish that could live in cold water, warm water, dirty water, clean water, blah, blah, blah. And so they found the world's ultimate fish, which was the carp. Right. Stood under guard, like armed guard at the Druid Ponds in Baltimore when they were brought here. And now, what a difference 150 years makes it.
Yeah.
Now they're fish.
It's been up and down for them. Fish and Wildlife Service brought them to Texas in, I think, 1879. A couple of years later, the state established its very first hatchery at Barton Springs, the big clear spring-fed swimming pool in downtown Austin, and specifically for carp. And there was such an uproar that 4 years later, the Texas Fish Commission was abolished, in part because of carp. In the carp hatchery, people were really ticked off at them. So it's up and down, up and down. We're really fortunate to have what are considered some trophy carp waters in downtown Austin, and we have a steady stream of visitors from Europe who come to fish for our wild carp in Lady Bird Lake, in Lake Austin, and Euro style fishing for the most part. But a lot of those folks are now trying to pursue carp with the fly as well, which is just a ton of fun.
Yeah, and the real reason I wrote that book, I mean, I didn't make any money on it or anything, but I wanted to, I wanted the blue collar, right? Like we're talking your blue collar fly fishing. I think that's awesome. I mean, find what's there, and blue collar it doesn't necessarily mean accessible to the, it's blue collar means you work hard for it. You work really damn hard for it.
That's right.
And carp is like the blue collar fish, man. It's a really cool, honest fish. And as we speak, if someone's tuning in from Terre Haute, Indiana right now, 99.9% sure that the closest fish swimming in water to you right now is a common carp.
That's correct. Yeah. And I agree with you 100%. I have a mental map of my routes to carp around the house here, and it's on 2 rivers and 3 creeks, all within about 20 minutes. So
this, by the way, has been very liberating for me because it is my kind of alter ego that I like leave in the closet. I'm a closet carp fisherman now because I'm with Trout Unlimited, so high profile, and like so many trout people are trout snobs and don't. And carp do kind of, in some places, bother trout and like blah, blah, blah. So politically, I have to say that so that I don't get fired or something. But, when it comes down to it, there's nothing wrong with carp. I like carp a lot.
Yeah, I do too. And I guess part of me growing up in, like many people like you, I know I came to fly fishing through gear fishing, and came to catch and release fishing through catch and fish for the table. And, so it's a journey, and everybody makes that journey at their own pace if they want to keep going. Because and when I got into it, I didn't know about FFI clubs. I didn't know about Trout Unlimited. I had some books. I probably didn't even have videos at that time, and just started doing it and made a lot of mistakes. And it took a long time to learn how to cast more than 20 feet. But I also just figured that if it swam in the water and it would eat a fly and it would pull on the end of my line, it was probably worth chasing. And I still feel that way. I mean, anything I can catch, in any body of water, I drive down the highway and I cross the stream and I look down and wonder what's in there.
Me too. I like that. There was like a couple summers ago where I live actually up in the mountains in Colorado, which is a great luxury, and I'm lucky, and I can literally go and walk from my house to a creek and catch trout, which is something that I dreamed of for a long, long time. But I found myself one summer driving down the hill 45 minutes to Denver to catch carp and forsaking the trout. So I like did 10-1 driving downhill to do that, just because I found it interesting and different. And I was not that I was forsaking trout or taking them for granted. And I suppose if I had one day left, the typical, if you got one day to do anything, where would you go? I'd be trout fishing for sure.
Yeah, no, I agree. I would too. I think there's, you hold a cutthroat trout in your hands, and it's, if you're fortunate enough to do that, it is kind of restores your faith in creation a little bit.
Right.
They're so incredibly beautiful, and the way they make their living in those high mountain streams is, they're tough animals, and they belong there. They're of a piece with the mountains, with the trees, with the water. I love them for sure.
I don't think this is a cop out, but I've long said that I feel closer to God when my boots are in the water and I'm catching fish on a Sunday morning than when my butt is planted in a church pew. And that's just the way it is with me.
Yeah, so. I don't know. I think it's that way with a lot of us, and I don't think it's a cop out at all, for sure. Well, I think that's taken us through most of your books. I know not all of them. And you've said, people have said about you, you've got a lot of irons in the fire. So I want to talk in a minute about this last pandemic year specifically, but just for someone who's a creative, whether you're a photographer, a blogger, a filmmaker, a writer, none of those pursuits are incredibly remunerative, I don't think, at least in the fishing world. How do you cobble together a living doing this? And is it worth trying?
Yeah, I think, it's hard. No doubt about it. It's hard. It's worth it if you can do it. It's hard to do it sometimes. You have to be honest about your own talents, and you have to be, I'm not picking on bloggers or ambassadors or any of that, but like if you want to make a real money earning wage these days, you have to transcend a world where a lot of people are willing to sell themselves for audience because they get a free reel, right? Mm. So like if you want to make money and feed your family and whatever, you've got to hone your craft and be like 10 times better than any quote unquote influencer. And I'm all for influencer. Ernest Hemingway was an influencer, right?
Sure.
It's just the media has changed over the years. I'm not picking on anybody, but I would say that if you want to be a writer or a photographer or whatever, because there's so much instant gratification out there, having as many irons in the fire, having as much connection to the community as we've been talking about this last, however many minutes, having boots in the water and substance and understanding the stuff that's beyond the scratch and sniff of the pretty 24-inch brown trout. That's the key. And staying true to yourself, and another thing that's really important is you don't have to tear somebody else down to bring yourself up. And that's something that's pervasive in our society in general, it seems. And it has no place in fishing and writing and art and any of that right now. You can respect your elders or your youngers. I don't think that I know it all better than some guy or woman who's 30 years old and has tricks and tips and ideas and insights or flavorful words. I'm totally down with that. I learn from that person, but I also respect, what Charlie Myers did or what Lefty Cray did, and I think it's being open-minded all the way around. It's kind of like music, I keep coming back to music, but like Willie Nelson is an old guy, but Willie Nelson was badass, is badass.
Still is, yeah.
Wasn't just badass for the music that people don't realize, but he played jazz chords like crazy. Those are jazz chords. Like he was an amazing technical guitarist, and it still is. And anybody who's worth their salt, whatever age they are, just sees that, understands that, and appreciates that. Just like Willie or someone who's in their 80s or 70s or 60s, whatever, will see some young virtuoso and say, that's fantastic too. So I think just appreciating art for art's sake and not having this competitive, thinking that the climb to the top is based on clicks or audience or this or that. It's really more a marathon and not a sprint is what I would say. And that's a very nuanced thing that I just said, but it's honest. So.
And I think it's a great observation. You've said before, you make a distinction between people who are anglers who happen to write or writers who happen to fish. And, Jim Harrison was a writer who happened to fish. Tom McGuane is a writer who happens to fish. I believe you're a writer who happens to fish. There's this, there's some company out there that does this saltwater publication. I think it comes out weekly or monthly, and they go around and they get all the guides to write columns, about their areas. And some of the guides are great writers, some of them are not. But a lot of those articles are just filled with shout outs to their sponsors, whoever's making their plastic baits or whatever, their rod and reel. But it seems to do well. People pick it up and seem to rely on it. And I wonder, does the quality of the writing even make a difference? Clearly there's an audience, but I sometimes get a little frightened because I wonder, is there an audience that even cares, that you took the time in Garden and Gun magazine to describe a tarpon lying under the water as an unexploded torpedo, which I thought was just an incredible description for the potency and the latent power, that implied. And it's just a beautiful image that I'm sure that didn't just come right off the cuff. You thought about that sentence, does that matter?
I believe so. At least I have faith that it does. And by the way, I'm just going to say right now, you've done more research on me than anyone who's ever interviewed me in the last 10 years. And I appreciate that. That's really, really powerful. You're digging way out of the box.
Well, it's been a joy, honestly. And I've learned so much over the last month or so as I've been trying to. I've been aware of you for a very long time, but as I've actually tried to catch up and think about the questions I wanted to ask you and the things I wanted to talk about, it's been an education for me and a real joy. So the pleasure is all mine.
Well, the pleasure is mine, and there's an art to interviewing and the questions and your preparedness. And kind of answering your own question, I guess is what I'm saying, is that there's a level of detail that matters. And just by virtue of the questions that you ask, it's reflective of all of that. And yes, absolutely. Yes. Okay. Words matter. Sentiment matters. How you craft them, how you put them together matters. They might not always be noticed, but ultimately they're going to matter.
Right on. And, all right. I'll be able to sleep tonight. Thank you for that, Kirk. Let's talk. Are you on a deadline here? Can we go a little bit long? A few minutes?
Oh, no. This is the most fun I've had in a long time.
Since Friday, since you went fishing anyway.
No. I got skunked. I cheer for the fish.
Yay. Yay. All right. So back in, I think it was 2019, maybe it was at IFTD, you sat down with April Vokey for her Anchored podcast. And yes. I'm a huge fan of the work April does. She's one of my heroes as an interviewer, heroines, and she's actually kindly agreed to be on my show a little bit later in the year. So I'm looking forward to that. But you told her, and this was before the pandemic, you told her that what we should be shooting for in fly fishing, in the fly fishing community, is quality engagement and not just adding people for the sake of adding folks. So here we are. I heard you say the other day that the RBFF, Recreational Boating and Fishing Foundation, released a study that estimates 17 million new users joined the ranks of boaters and anglers in 2020. I see the same thing from looking at license sales in Texas. We see that there was as much as a 20 or 30% increase in license sales that had been declining for a while, and all of a sudden it shot up. Biggest year, maybe bigger year than the year the movie came out. What's it done to us, and what's the good, what's the bad?
Well, again, thanks for the detail on that. I was, by luck, I'm also the editor of Angling Trade magazine, and so I've covered the business end of fly fishing, which is aside from what we talked about with consumers. But the magazine is small, goes to 8,000 people. It's everyone who makes or sells, all the shops or manufacturers in fly fishing, whatever. But I've been doing that for 15 years. And I remember 10 years ago being in the room where it happened, to borrow from Hamilton. And it's like, where we're all talking about, we've got to grow the sport. Everything's dying. And it was the same with Field and Stream. Hunting numbers are shrinking. Fishing numbers are about, staying stable. But we got to get, we've got all these pavement walkers who are making all the decisions. Kids are playing video games instead of being in the outdoors. There's nature deficit disorder, as Richard Louv described.
Richard Louv, another really fine author, by the way. And the very first thing I ever read from him was Fly Fishing for Sharks, which is still one of my favorite books, his look at fishing cultures across America. But I'm sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to say that. Yeah.
No, and actually I got Richard Louv. I got lucky and had Richard Louv write a jacket review for Tideline, which is my saltwater book that came through Conway Bowman, who fished for sharks.
There you go. That's right.
It just shows the connectivity of all this. And my wife did her master's thesis when she was a student on nature deficit disorder. So
awesome.
It all comes together. So anyway, back then, the thought was we have to expose the sport to as many people as possible. Throw as wide a net as we can, and by osmosis, we will grow. And I think now, as that experiment has played out over the last several years, even before the pandemic, we came to realize that just commercialized trout trips specifically, because you can't play in salt. You can't just decide to go out and catch a tarpon. You've got to have some basic skills. But in the trout river, you can be a never ever one-hit wonder and go out, and the guide's really good, and they throw a bobber and a weighted rig and tell you when that thing goes down, pull on it, and you can catch a 20-inch trout. That has proven to be popular amongst the one-hit wonders, but it's also created a hole at the bottom of the bucket of those who want to go out and fly fish and engage. And my point is, I think we've all realized that anybody at all costs thing is bullshit. And I hope I could say bullshit. Is that okay if I said bullshit?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, we're not on FM radio here. I think it's fine.
Okay, so that's bullshit. And what we really need is people who are engaged and care about rivers, want to buy gear, and the only way you can do that is if you actually have a spark lit, like a pilot lit. And I was talking to your friend, Josh Crumpton, who's my friend too. Mm-hmm. And instead of being gatekeepers, you need to be door openers, right? And door openers are different than gatekeepers. And door openers are people who prompt people to go down the path of self-discovery and enjoyment of the sport and all the things that we've been talking about, all the things that have lit our personal pilot lights over the years. We got to light those pilot lights. And so that's what I was saying to April 2 years ago or whatnot. Mm-hmm. And I firmly believe that. And it's even come into more clear focus during the pandemic, because in March, none of us knew what was going to happen. And then some guides just ran friggin' cash registered trips for all the bored Texas execs who didn't have anything to do. But so they came to Colorado, but they don't give a shit about fishing. And so with all deference to Texas, again, I love Texas,
Sure.
but like, screw those people. We don't want them. We don't need them. We need people who, and if they're from Texas or Colorado or whatever, we want people who care about fishing, who start about fishing. And that's what I was saying about guides, is they can be so important now, so critical now. And if they just churn the turnstiles and the cash registers, they will cripple the sport, and we will end up worse in 3 years than we are now.
So I think at the beginning of the pandemic, and even during the pandemic, I mean, even as we got into the summer and things obviously weren't getting all that much better, I think the bigger concern was not that, or at least what I saw here, was not that people were churning the cash register, but that businesses might close, that guides who couldn't safely put two people in a raft and social distance and go down the river, they, weren't booking their trips. And, because of occupancy and mask mandates and the rest of it, and non-essential businesses, fly shops were closed. Now, I say that our local fly shop, Living Waters Fly Fishing in Round Rock, which is primarily a warm water shop and a creek shop, even though the owner, Chris Johnson, is very involved with trout conservation, particularly in New Mexico and Colorado. But that shop had their biggest year ever in a year when they weren't even open for months at a time, or had very limited capacity. Sometimes could not get product, could not get rods and reels, could not get flies, could not get fly tying materials, could not hold in-person classes. Chris does a free intro to fly fishing, which is a half day, where to go, how to do it, casting lessons, basic gear that you might want, our area rivers. He does that once a month, and he couldn't do that anymore. So he went online, but he ended up having the biggest year that he had ever had. And he chalks it up, and I may have him on the show later in the year to talk about this, but he chalks it up to the relationships he built in the community that he has been actively engaged in for the last 13 years. And the fact that when the chips were down, people who don't even live here started ordering things, calling in phone orders, and he doesn't even have an online shop so much, and he had to bring in extra staff to help mail stuff, and he started putting his stuff online and giving out a lot of free information. So I think he was a little bit agile. He turned and he was able to meet that. So it was a big deal. It was a big year. It was for a lot of people, but it's had some impacts. You wrote a really terrific editorial called Rivergeddon that got picked up and mentioned by the New York Times and was all over the place. And I sent you a note after that and said, how do we try to mitigate some of these impacts that you're describing, which I'd like you to talk about in a minute, without coming across as elitist gatekeepers. And you just kind of answered that by saying we have to be door openers, not barrier creators, what you told Josh. But anyway, talk to that a little bit, would you?
Well, I think it's going to stick. And I think the cool thing is, also, being in the room where it happened years and years ago, the other question we were asking ourselves is, how do we get younger? How do we get more diverse?
Yep.
How do we have more diversity in fly fishing? How do we have more people of color? How do we have younger people? How do we have more women? How do we move fly fishing from being an area that's, predominantly associated with anglers who are white males who are 50 or 60 years old or older? I live on the Yampa River here in Colorado now, and I can tell you that every time I walk down to the river, it was crowded last year, but you know who it was crowded with? It wasn't hordes and hordes of old white guys. It was families, young families. It was young families,
young couples,
and couples. And it was people from the city who had come up. It was people of different ethnicities. It was all those things wrapped in a great big bow, and that had dropped out of the sky and landed on the river. And like that gift was given to us. And now it's a matter of how we attach and engage with that and keep that and sustain that. So I didn't mean to divert from your original question, but I think that ultimately at the end of the day, people want to know how to fish. People want to know how to be successful. People want to know how to appreciate nature. People don't want to be lectured to. People don't want to have, traffic boat, guide thing that looks like a Disneyland ride. So they're at the Pirates of the Caribbean ride on the Colorado. They don't want that. What they want is a serious, honest, genuine, lasting connection to nature. And if we can foster that and create that kind of what I said with April as quality engagement, everybody wins. The newbies win, the old bees win. We got more stewards for rivers and people who care about rivers, and we got more momentum politically and financially to keep rivers clean and healthy. We got more moxie on the Hill and in Washington, D.C. We've got all those things. If we just play it smart right now and focus on quality engagement across all walks of life and be as inclusive as we can.
So I think one of the issues that people are maybe grumbling about or worried about, and you alluded to this in your editorial, is that some of these well-known, popular, productive reaches of rivers, whether it's the Yampa, whether it's the Henry's Fork, whether it's the San Juan tailwater, are getting hammered by these first-time anglers. And my solution is, well, if you've been at this a while, go find about other water, go there. I mean, there are plenty of rivers with fish in them. And just go there, spread it out. So it doesn't seem like it should be such a big deal. And I also think that those new people who are new to the sport will realize that there are other rivers and other places to fish and other ways to fish, and they'll start spreading out as well. But I mean, are the guides really the gatekeepers here, or not gatekeepers, but are they the front line, or is it people like you and me? I mean, you and me as anglers, just anglers who happen to be out there, or maybe, have folks who email us questions and say, hey, where can I go? Or how do I get started? Is it the shop owners? I mean, who needs to be paying attention to this, and what can we do?
We all need to be paying attention to this, and we all need to be working together. And if there is a shop or guides that are just running production trips down and choking out a public stretch of water that's very popular, we need to say something about that guide. And they're not, I understand they're ringing the cash register, but that's not cool. On the other hand, there are lots of places to go. There's a lot of water. There's a lot of places to spread out, and it's an interesting time in that we can discover the backcountry. I think there are some philosophical changes that even the guide who's running the production trips down the river can help to facilitate and promote. In other words, you don't need to catch 30 fish in a day to call it a good day. You don't need to catch a 24-inch brown trout now to call it a trophy fish. Like, if you can get enough people to think that a 12-inch greenback cutthroat trout is every bit the trophy that a 24-inch rainbow trout that has no natural biological reason for being in Colorado or Montana has.
Amen.
Right?
Yep.
Those types of subtle shifts in the mindset will play very big in the next, this summer. Like, it's starting now. Like, this is the transitional summer. This is the one that's going to change the future of fly fishing. It's like right friggin' now. Yep. Starting now in March, and what happens between March now and October is going to, in our lifetime at least, forever stamp what happens in fly fishing, at least fly fishing for trout. And those who are too deaf to understand that's happening need to wake up and tune in. And those who do understand need to voice up and be heard louder, because I think if we work together, it's going to be great. We could have so many cool things happen. Stewards, people who care, younger people, diversity, all those things can happen. But if we just keep churning and fight with each other and all that, we could step on our own toes and end up just seriously regretting an opportunity missed.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and man, it's exciting, isn't it? Looking into this coming fishing season. I know that. Well, before I get to that, I want to say, can you explain for our listeners and also for me how excise taxes work on sporting goods and what license fees do? Because 17 million new users is truly a huge influx into just the federal and state coffers for conservation and hatcheries and enforcement. But assumably some of those folks are also going to find their way to Trout Unlimited and, backcountry hunters and anglers and some of these other conservation groups.
Right. So with all due apologies to my bosses at Trout Unlimited, and if I miss this or whatever, I mean, I'll give you a general idea. Like, people buy a reel and it's imported from Korea or whatever, and there's a tax on that. It's an excise tax, and it goes into a pool that ultimately the government is able to create this great fund, and they reinvest that by contracting out with other groups to do conservation type projects. So like Trout Unlimited would get some money, or Ducks Unlimited does, and others, and so on and so forth.
And also, I think they pass through some of the money to the states as well for their programs too.
Absolutely. So the bottom line is that, like, for every little chunk of change, you buy a $300 reel, 5%, $15 of that goes into a pool, 5%, and the government then creates this mass, and they decide, and then they can divvy it out to states and others and so forth. So it's a good phenomenon. Like, this is why we always say more consumers, good thing. The 17 million people who are now boating and fishing could be a fantastically good thing, but it's only fantastically good if they actually give a shit and buy stuff and fish and want to keep fishing. If they just spent $300 or $500 or whatever they spent to float down on a raft and take a Disneyland boat ride down the Arkansas River in Colorado, they're one-hit wonders,
So we're back to what you said: quality engagement.
Exactly. And again, I'm not against the one-hit wonders. And there's some reason for that, but you can't drive a hole through the bottom of the bucket by only focusing on the one-hit wonders. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, right on. Yeah, that makes total sense. The good news is, as you have reported, that same RBFF study said that it was at 90% of folks said that they were going to stick with it. So a lot of those people who, because the bowling alley was closed and the movie theaters were closed and they couldn't go to Disney World or Disneyland, or they couldn't take that trip to Hawaii, they went fishing in their local river instead. They decided they liked it and they're going to do it again.
It said that they wanted to do it again.
Okay.
So, wanting to and actually doing it are kind of two different things. And I'm a little bit of a skeptic by trade because I'm a magazine editor, right? So let's see. But let's also accept an onus to make that wanting to and actually doing a reality. It's on us to make that happen. That's the transition that we can make happen. And That's what the industry needs to do.
Okay, good deal. The last thing I wanted to touch on with you, and if there's anything you particularly want to talk about, we certainly can. But the last thing I wanted to touch on is diversity and in the fly fishing community. And I have seen just organically over the last 5 or 10 years, an incredible number, as you said, of young people, of people of color, young women who are getting into the sport. But I still think, and I've written about this when I got my book, which came out last year, and held it in my hands for the first time and flipped through it. in addition to some couple, to a few boneheaded typos and, the errata that we probably all
they happen to everybody. And by the way, is there any greater feeling than opening a box and pulling out a book and smelling it? Like it's an olfactory thing, right? It's smelling a book and seeing it, and at the same time, it's like it almost brings tears to my eyes thinking about that process. It's a birthing process.
It is, and it's a tactile process. And all of a sudden, this child that you have labored to create is about to be out there in the world, for better or worse. So, yeah, it's scary, it's exciting, and it's richly rewarding. But one of the things I noticed flipping through it was, oh my God, so many of these people are so white, and that's okay. That's I'm pretty white, and what it drove home to me is that maybe I have not cast my net wide enough in choosing my fishing partners, and I made a really concerted effort to show women in the pages of the book, and I think as people who work in print media, that is something that we can do, is that we can show through the images we use and the people we choose to highlight that this is a sport for everyone. This is a pastime that is open and available, and that people will be welcomed in it. I know this is a particular concern to you as someone who's the father of a son who has brown skin or browner skin, and is there just keep doing what we're doing, or these books that I'm editing now for the local angler series that are coming up, we just set up a cover photo shoot, and Dallas, and the author there, Greg, said, you know what, I'm going to invite some of my friends who are people of color who I fish with, just because I get to choose who's in these photos, and why not choose folks who look like an underrepresented community in the fly fishing world. And that actually came across a little more patronizing and mansplaining than I meant it to, but we'll let it go.
No. And you're the last person I could tag that to. But I would say, as an editor, my feeling is that instead of showing, I'm all about producing. And in other words, I'd rather have artists of color and art writers of color and photographers of color telling their story. And I think we need to do a way better job of offering those platforms and those opportunities, and the rest will take care of itself. We editors need to do it, and myself, front of the line included with this, need to do a better job of finding talent and showcasing talent that represents the work of people of color, be that writing and video and film and photography and whatnot. You run a risk. It's a very complex and difficult conversation, and you run a risk of what they call tokenism. You don't want to go there. You don't want to be.
And I think that was my fear after I listened to myself say what I just said, was that it sounded like tokenism, and that's not what I meant. And it's, and it's hard, Kirk, for two white guys, middle-aged white guys, to sit here and talk about this. I mean, it's because I don't know how to talk about it as well as I would like to.
So, and neither do I know how to talk about it. So I'm not going to freaking talk about it. I'm going to let somebody who knows how to talk about it. I have the keys to the car that lets people talk about different things. I'm going to hand over the keys and let them talk about it.
Right. That's right.
That's my point. That's my whole point on that. Yeah. Because you know what? I would suck at talking about it. And even this conversation that we're having now, I'm probably sucking at talking about it, but I'm trying, and I'm open and I'm thinking. But my solution is my mom told me when I was very little that I have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. So I don't talk about diversity. I listen about diversity. And I want others to talk in places where I'm not able or qualified to talk. And you're right. My son is born in Guatemala, and I have seen this through, even through T-ball league and up, you know what I mean? I've seen this in a lot of ways, but, I wouldn't trade that for the world. And I'm really proud that I'm part Guatemalan now because of my son. Right.
Yes, 100%. My grandfather's family is from Mexico, and my middle name is Ramon, and it's I get people don't quite believe it, but so there's a lot of that's maybe not obvious, that I grew up with and have thought about, and some of the things that my mother's generation, she's one of seven, the youngest of seven children, that they faced in South Texas, in the 50s and 60s, that has informed my view of these things. But I think you're absolutely right, and so that's what I meant. So here I'm struggling with what can we do to show folks who maybe don't look like the stereotype, the old stereotype of a fly angler out there. And you're saying, what can we do to allow those folks to tell their stories? And you are exactly right. I think that is the key.
Well, thank you for saying that. I think the good stories transcend, right?
Correct.
At the end of the day, good stories transcend, and it doesn't matter what wrapper they come in. It's like you don't care about the label on the wine bottle; you care about the wine in the bottle. And I think that's the path I'm going down as editor. It's the best that I can do. I'm not perfect, and I fail, and I'm trying to wrestle with this just like everyone else is. But my decision has been to speak less and listen more and show more.
You said something recently, 2 watchwords for this year in particular, but I think they're 2 really terrific watchwords for life, and generally grace and humility. We need to extend a lot of grace, and we need to act with a lot of humility. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that you said that and that insight, and it's something I'm going to be trying to do as we navigate the end of the pandemic and whatever the new world looks like for all of us.
I think that you can't go wrong with grace and humility. As an editor, as a writer, I mean, isn't that right? Isn't that like what we're looking for right now, Aaron? Like fail safes. What are the fail safes in our lives? We, can you go to the grocery store? Can you do this? What is the fail safe? Well, there are 2 fail safes I know for sure in writing, editing, life, general. It's grace and humility, and
fishing as well, right?
Well, fishing, of course. But, and if you apply grace and humility to fishing, boom, you're all set. You're guaranteed a spot in Nirvana.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also reminded of that Mary Gauthier song, "Mercy Now," and she sings in that, my church and my country could use some mercy now. My brother could use some mercy now. My father could use some mercy now. We could all use a little mercy now. And I think the way we get mercy is through grace and humility. So I think that's exactly right.
Well, cheers, brother. I got nothing. Yeah, cheers.
Cheers, man. Hey, is there anything else you wanted to talk about, Kirk? I've got one final question for you, but is there anything else that's on your mind that you wanted to say to our listeners?
No, I'm honored for the opportunity to talk to you. I every time anyone interviews me, I feel like, why in the hell am I here? And I just like fishing and like good words, and I try to do what I can on that. And again, it's kind of how the hell did I ever get here? has been the theme of my life. So, but talking to you has been really not only enjoyable but cathartic, because I think we pulled through some issues that are, it's a hot and heavy time. It's a weird time with fishing. It's a weird time with writing. It's a weird time with art. It's a weird time with a lot of things, but health and pandemic and all that stuff. But I think, I'm ultimately an optimist, and on the other side of things, I think it's going to be good on all fronts. I really do.
Well, I think both as an editor and as an angler, you have to be an optimist, right? Or you wouldn't keep doing these things. Man, it has been so much fun talking to you, and I can't wait to get to Beaver Island with you, maybe in 2022. And fingers crossed, if things work out, maybe at the end of the season coming up, maybe up on the Baldwin on your home waters there in Michigan.
Oh, well, yeah, that's for sure. But that was like the off script kind of stuff. That was
yeah. No, I'm just looking forward to sitting around a campfire with you and listening to you play. And
that's that. Yeah, but
yeah, right on. My last question for you is if you could go fly fishing anywhere with anyone tomorrow, where would it be? What would it be for? And tell me about what that trip looks like.
Okay, so there's three answers to this question. There's the politically correct answer that my mom and my wife and everybody, and they want me to say, and which is true, and it's not, I'm not lying, but it's with my son and my wife, and it's on a home river in Colorado, and it's up high in the high country on a little creek, and it's dry flies and it's cutthroat trout, and it's that.
And 3 weights? Are you throwing a 3 weight up there?
3 weight bamboo, just
nice.
The whole full on
right.
Traditional. Okay.
So, but what's the real answer?
Tarpon. Tarpon freaked me out. I daydream about trout all the time, but I night dream about tarpon. I work for Trout Unlimited, but I freaking love tarpon. I've caught, I don't know how many trout in my life, but I've got several dozen tarpon, and I just love tarpon.
I have to tell you, we have.
That's bad. I'm in trouble now. I'm like,
you shouldn't be in trouble. They are amazing fish, and are before this big freeze that we had, a little while ago, we're making a huge comeback here in Texas, and there is no fish I would rather cast to. And you wrote one time that you jump a tarpon, or maybe it jumps you, and right. I think that's exactly right. I mean, it is. You could get pulled over the edge easily. Yeah,
and the problem with tarpon, again, qualifying your question, if you had only one day, well, you can't guarantee that it's going to be right for tarpon.
That's
so
right.
You can stand on the bow of a skiff and sit there and nothing happens. Whereas if you're in the high country and you're catching the trout and you're doing this and that, some magic is going to happen one way or the other.
There's going to be a hatch at some point during the day, right?
Right. Yeah. But if you told me, if you qualify, again, I'm not criticizing your question, but if you qualified it, you said it was peak, perfect, full on, game on, and conditions are right, and you got that day to do that, it's not even close. It's tarpon.
Yeah. So, here in Texas, we have two distinct populations of tarpon. We have our resident juvenile fish. And as you've pointed out before, no one really knows where they go to spawn or any of that. But it seems that these fish will hang out in the bays and river mouths for, maybe up to about 48 inches. I don't know how old that is for a tarpon, before they head out and join the larger population and do their migration thing. So then usually sometime late in August, so we have those fish year round, and sometime late in August, usually through Thanksgiving, maybe a little later, a little earlier, depending on if we have a red tide event or, an early hard cold front that pushes the bait out. We'll have the migratory fish moving down the coast. Our fish seem to come north to south. So I don't know if these are fish that are coming from Florida and Louisiana and coming down, but they're all going back to the Bay of Campeche in Mexico. And those fish are potential world record fish, triple digit, many, some over 200 pounds. And so we've got a little window to fish for those. I enjoy the juvenile tarpon, a 30 or 40 pound tarpon on a 7 weight or an 8 weight is almost as much fun as I can handle. And I don't know if you saw, I posted a video on my Instagram. I was waiting for the tugboat. It was late to crew change, my day job as a merchant mariner. And I saw these fish rolling. And of course I had a rod in the car, but it was a 6 weight. I went and grabbed it anyway. I wasn't planning on tarpon fishing that day. I didn't have any tarpon flies. I had a lunch money, a bass streamer made by Matt Bennett here in Austin, in long ear sunfish colors. And I'm like, well, it's what I got. And I had I think I had some level 20 pound fluorocarbon or something in the car. And I pulled some of that off, made a quick leader, and not only jumped, but landed a tarpon before my boat got to the dock. And I was in a bad mood, Kirk, when I got there, and I was tired. I'd driven, the 4 hours from home to get down there, and then the boat's going to be 2 hours late. And I really just wanted to take a nap before I went on watch at noon. And that wasn't going to happen. And then the tarpon happened, and it made my entire week.
That is exactly what we've been talking about for all this time. And by the way, I would fly to Texas just to ride on the boat with you, just because I think that is so freaking cool.
I would love to do that. I can't even do that for my family. Yeah.
That's a story.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, that is like a fantasy for me, is to rather than coming down to fish with you, and we could fish after we get off the boat, but I just want to ride on the boat and talk.
Yeah, man, it's a lot of fun. I mean, it really is. I don't like being away from home half a year, but I do like coming home and not having to worry about work at all. My day job work. Of course, I'm doing the writing and editing while I'm home, but I can self-pace that and can do it from the comfort of the bed if I want to, so it's kind of nice. I'm lucky. I'm lucky too. I've been extended some grace for sure.
Well, so let's do your boat, my boat.
Yeah, man. I'll have to see how we can figure that out.
My boat's not nearly as impressive as yours, but we'll do your boat, my boat. And that could be a story. That's actually a good story.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Your boat's a better fishing platform.
No, it's a good story. It's a good story.
All right, man. Well, is there anything else you wanted to throw at us before we go?
No, I just wanted to thank you. This has been really fun. It's like sitting around the campfire. This is cool.
Man. I am so incredibly grateful to you for doing this, Kirk, for taking time out of your weekend and talking to me. And I look forward to seeing you in person sooner rather than later.
Yeah, of course. Well, it'll happen.